McCarthy, otherwise known as John.
Yeah,
Matt Cost. I have a little bio to read, and I'm going to step over there and have a conversation with two great authors. So John is a Maine native who has a deep appreciation for the state's rich characters and natural beauty. Growing up in Maine, developed a strong connection to the land and its people, and these experiences have influenced his writing. When you moved home, because you were like, there's no better place to
there's no
be.
place to come.
Through your writing, you strive to capture the spirit of Maine and the people who call it home. Believe that storytelling is a powerful way to connect with others, which is completely true. I know that from Storytime here. And to create a sense of community, and they hope that their work will inspire readers to explore the beauty and complexity of this beautiful state. Matt was a history major at Trinity College, owned a mystery bookstore. I didn't know there was specifically a mystery bookstore.
It was. It's actually the original Coffee Dog mystery bookstore that's in my books.
That's very cool.
It lives on.
A video store, a gym, before, as he says, serving a 10-year sentence as a junior high school teacher. And as a person who has always wanted to be a librarian and never wanted to be a teacher, I get it. In 2014, he was released and began writing, and that's what he does. He writes histories and mysteries. So he has published 4 books in the Mainly Mystery series, which I did have displayed here. But then someone took the first one out, so I moved them and brought the other section out. He's also published 4 books in the Clay Wolf Trap series, which is right there. And the next book is out in December of this year. Also your historical novels, I know there's a Joshua Chamberlain one, that's the one at Every Hazard. Is that the one?
I've had Every Hazard. I've got one on Cuba.
And Love in a Time of Hate, and also I Am Cuba. So in April of this past year, you combined your love of histories and mysteries into a historical private eye mystery set in 1923 Brooklyn called Gone Awry, which we don't have yet. Now you live in Brunswick with your wife, Harper. They have 4 grown children and a chocolate lab and a basset hound. And you spend your days at the computer writing. Which sounds really great. And where do you live? You live right in Skowhegan.
It's here. So the first one, it's Matt, you want to tell us kind of about your journey from Madison High School to published author? Anything about that?
Yeah. No, I grew up in Madison and played sports here, and went off to Trinity College. It was there that a professor inspired me to write about Latin America, so I chose Cuba. So in 1991, I wrote the first draft of a book called I Am Cuba. And I kind of completed that and realized upon completion that it was terrible and that it needed a lot of work and a few different things, but one was I needed to visit Cuba. And so in 2016 I visited Cuba and came back and finished that up and submitted it to a publisher, and they published it in 2020. Along the way, as Julie said, I owned some businesses, including the Coffee Dog Mystery Bookstore, which is didn't have a very long life, but lives on in my Mainly Mystery series. Golf Langdon also owns the Coffee Dog Mystery Bookstore, and Brunswick couldn't really support a PI or a mystery bookstore, but you put the two together, he's able to make a living. And raised 4 kids and sent them off into the world, and did some junior high teaching, and now I solely write. So
That's awesome.
And how about yourself? What journey did you take from? Yours is much longer.
Yeah, I have a convoluted all over the country kind of a journey, but it's funny, the first thing I ever tried to write was, I'm a nurse, I've been a nurse for 30 years, and I was working nights on a behavioral health unit, and I said, I want to write this story. It's actually this story. My grandmother had told it to me, it was a true story. I said, I should write this thing, And so I wrote about 40 pages by hand, because we didn't have a computer or anything. And I read it and I said, wow, this is awful. And I said, I threw it away, and I realized part of it is because 30 years I hadn't read enough. The more you read, the better. I feel like it's the easier it is to write. And so when it came around to thinking about a first book, I picked up that story again and said, all right, let me do it right this time. It is fiction. It's a true event that happened out in Solon, but it is all fictionalized from there. We talk about it. I'll describe it.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to ask you a bit further.
Yeah, that's
I read the book, and immediately there's Lake View, which has a golf course and a theater, and I believe Groucho Marx amongst other people. So if you want to talk about how the real places and things, and maybe some of the other people that went to Lake View Theater in real life.
They, when I wrote it, I don't write from a plot. I just knew where I wanted to start and end. And so I kind of picked an arbitrary date in 1933, and it takes place in the town of Monroe. I want to be Madison. Monroe is the next president after Madison. Well, there is a Monroe, Maine, so I'm sure people will say, this has nothing to do with our town. But it's a conglomeration of Madison, Skowhegan, East Madison, and then Sparta is Athens, Solon. So I had an uncle in 1938. He was part of one of 17 kids. And there was 12 boys and 5 girls. To a widow, because when the 17th one was still on the breast, the father drops dead during the Depression. So the older boys worked outside the farm, and my grandfather ran the farm, and one of their brothers was walking home one night from something or other out in Solon. Somebody drives by, hits him with a stick of wood and kills him. That whole summer, my grandmother told me this story. She was a child. They rode in wagons still, they didn't even own a car. And every time they would ride by this spot where he got killed after it rained, because it's packed hard underneath, but they would grate it, sort of soft on there. Every time it rained, that blood puddle would keep coming back for the whole summer. And that's where the name Red Road came from. And so from that story, we asked different people in the family what happened. They said, well, the brothers got him, and the one said they ran the family out of town, but nobody could really tell me the truth anymore, and anybody that would know was long passed away. So I just came up with, if your brother was killed on a dark road, would you wait for justice, or would you try to do something yourself? That's how it started, from the story my grandmother told me a long time ago. But it's been fun to put little things in, like I put the Strand Theater. They go to the Strand Theater when they go to town. There's a mill in town and stuff like that. And then Lakeview is, of course, Lakewood, and I picked 1933, and if you go on their website, it tells you every actor who's ever been there and what years they were there. And so I looked and said, oh, somebody good was there in 1933, and it was Groucho Marx and his wife, Ruth Johnson. Just perfect. Yeah, so I worked it in there, and it works in, definitely in the second book too, it works into there.
So are those books part of the series?
Yeah.
Would you consider them a series?
They are, yeah, and you could read them independently, but to kind of know who's who would be, you get the introductions of the characters really in the first book.
I have a question. 17 kids?
Yeah.
Your family?
Yeah, it would be my great-grandfather's family. It was actually, it would have been 18, but one passed away as an infant in a 21-year span. So wasn't much birth control.
So you have a lot of relatives.
Yeah, oh yeah, what's interesting is a bunch of them didn't get married and have kids. So maybe they just decided they had enough siblings. But they lived, there used to be a farmhouse out on Raleigh Mountain, out there on your way to, just kind of on your way to Solon, I guess maybe. It used to be a big fire, burnt in 2015, but it was a huge farmhouse, and obviously it had to be. I just try and picture like 17 people sitting at a dinner table every night having to make food for them, And then so him dropping dead and leaving her like that wasn't.
Wow.
I would have dropped dead too.
Yeah, she might have strangled him. That might have been what happened.
That was dark control back then.
Yeah, I understand, like, we've had enough of this. Get on your own side of the bed. So tell me about one of your series.
I guess, my first mystery series is the Mainly Mystery series. And the first one, Mainly Power, was something that I wrote 20 years ago and self-published a small amount, and it's going to end up coming back around because after I found a publisher, I said, hey, if I remaster this pretty heavily, would you consider traditionally publishing? And so they did that with Mainly Power. But Mainly Power is, now 5 books deep in the series, and there was, some of the early books, there's some Madison and Skowhegan in them. So write about what you know. And I'm living in Brunswick, so my PI does live in Brunswick, Maine, and he also owns the Mystery Bookstore, which is the only real place. I changed the names of all the Brunswick places, but he also has the Coffee Dog, who is his chocolate lab, who was my dog at the time. So he lives on, and the bookstore lives on, but on the pages of the book. But Mainly Power, we come up and they find a key witness who's drunk in a bar called the Depot. Oh wait, I changed the name. It was the Pines, but it was really the Old Depot. And there's some interaction because a Flower First organization was up here fighting against the paper companies to save the land, and that becomes one of the key elements in the book. In the second book, Mainly Fear, I kind of put a private prep school into Skowhegan, which is MECI. I'm real creative with these changes. And there's a prep school basketball star from the inner city of Boston who's up here in Skowhegan, Maine, trying to fit in, and some bad things happen that lead him to go on a vandalism spree. And the mother of this prep school basketball star hires Goff Langdon to find out not if he did the crime, which it was obvious that he did, but why he did it. And so we start digging into that. And then I progress up through my books into Mainly Money, which is a blackmail of a U.S. senator down in the Brunswick area, and on to Mainly Angst, which happens during COVID times, and there's a lot of angst in that book. And then just recently I released Mainly Wicked, which, as the title might suggest, gets very wicked. It's there's a satanic cult of Wendigos based on the Church of Satan, which is a real thing. And back in the 1970s, they were sending missionaries out and calling them grottos to develop the Church of Satan. And this one came to Durham, Maine, and was so far off the hook that the Church of Satan expelled them. And they kind of go underground for a while, but in the 2022, they resurface and start acting up in the Brunswick area again. And so that's the 5 books of my Mainly Mystery series in a nutshell, so to speak.
So Matt, you said that you started self-publishing 20 years ago. I mean, there's no Amazon. How does this happen? How do you self-publish? How does that even occur? And then how do you distribute them?
I did Mainly Power and Mainly Fear. I'd written them, thought they were pretty good. I might have been wrong, they needed some work. And I found a press to put it together and found somebody to do the artwork. And so it wasn't a one-stop deal anymore. Now you can just go to Amazon and kind of do the one-stop everything. I had to format and do the covers, and I have a couple original covers still circulating out there from my self-publishing days. One was 2000 and one was 2002, and they kind of filtered away to nothing. And like I said, when I got I Am Cuba published and found a publisher, I went back and said, hey, I'm a much better writer. I've been working on this craft for a while. So if I, remaster them pretty heavily, would you consider doing them? And in the middle there, I was also, when I did self-publish with Amazon, the Joshua Chamberlain book. And I did that, I Am at Every Hazard. And so in 2015, I self-published that through Amazon, which was the easier one-stop deal. But when I, again, with that book, I remastered it with my new publisher and said, you know, if I work this over, will you take a look? And they did and published it.
But on the first one, you go to the publisher, you get the thing printed, then what? I mean, it shows you drive around the back of your car? I mean, what, how do you go ahead and let people know this is for sale?
There's I would go to bookstores.
Yeah.
Exactly, back of the car.
Yeah.
But even bigger was convenience stores. So back in 2000, I'd stop at a convenience store, and a lot of the different ones, the manager had some discretionary money, and I had a little stand that I set up.
Yeah.
And I give them 10 books and put it on their counter, and those sold very well actually. A lot of those convenience stores almost probably sold better than the bookstores did.
Oh, that's a riot.
So yeah, but there weren't too many of those out there, because as you're pointing out, the circulation was limited to how far I could drive.
Right.
I have a friend who has a book out right now, and she still does that. She drives all the way to Jackman, all the stores, Solon, Bingham, Barry's up in the forest. She sells her books to them at a discount, and then they sell them. But still, she said that's one of the, other than her website, that's one of the best ways that she sells them is convenience stores.
Well, you figure Maine has like this tourism corridor. Even places like Bingham, Solon, Jackman, people are traveling for vacation. If they have enough money to travel that far up for vacation, then they do have some discretionary money. And they're probably going to stop, gas up, and they're like, hey, look at this. Here is some local color. Here's a local author. And they purchase the book. As opposed to a bookstore that has 20,000 different volumes in it.
Right. And they're usually sideways on the shelf, so
Yeah, right, you can't
it's
see
hard to jump out at you for sure. So
They're just going up camp. I need something to read. I can only play cribbage so long.
So I wanted to ask you about the Hatfields and McCoys. Did that influence your writing at all? The famous feud in the late 19th century between two families in Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky. And as I'm reading your book, I'm thinking Hatfields and McCoys. Did that influence you at all, or?
It didn't, but it does kind of go along with my thinking with it was kind of rich versus poor. And I stole a line from Bono once that I saw him on a talk show, and he was talking about, in America, if you see a big house, people say, wow, someday I'm going to be like that guy. In Ireland, if they see a big house, they say, oh, someday I'm going to get this son of a bitch. And so it's like that kind of mentality that they're this big Irish poor family, and here's this guy, and they're named the Morelands, and they make a joke that because they own more land than anybody else in the county, and the guy goes around just keeps buying that land, and so there's this back and forth after Jim gets killed, and how do you how would you wreck a guy who's way more powerful than you? And so another convenience of just by luck, when I picked 1933, that was the last year of Prohibition. So I was able to take a whole angle on that I hadn't anticipated really in the beginning, and it worked out good because you think they all knew Prohibition was coming to an end. They were pretty sure they had to wait till after the election. So if you're somebody out running booze, trying to run as much as fast as you can before everybody can just buy it again. And I think you asked about did they make whiskey or something? They made this stuff they call it the poachine. This is what it's called in Ireland. It's a potato liquor. And if you don't do it right, it comes out like wood alcohol. It'd be like all greasy or something. So they would make it, this family, because they had potatoes and they had water. So they'd get their hands on some honey or something, some other kind of sugar, and they'd make this stuff. And my aunt, Eleanor Dubois, once. They got hold of the
Like
recipe.
marriage.
Yeah, and they tried to make it. And so they said it's supposed to taste like vodka Collins. And it tasted like turpentine. And you couldn't choke it down. So they might have overdone it. Maybe it was like wood alcohol. I don't know if anybody ever.
Well, if it tastes like turpentine, you shouldn't choke it.
Yeah.
Depends how desperate you are.
Right.
Yeah.
What are your options?
So that worked its way in there, but it is funny. I guess you think, just like anybody, if you have corn around, you can make you some whiskey or something like that. So, yeah, so they did.
Hatfields and McCoys were both running moonshine, so it was a similar sort of thing. So
What is interesting about that is on this first book, I was approached by this gal who I made a trailer that I put on Facebook or on Instagram, and she saw it. And she said, "Hey, would you be interested in working with a screenwriter on this book?" And I said, "Well, this sounds kind of sketchy." And then I looked him up, and he actually does write movies, so I said, "Okay, sure." And I talked with him. And then we got hooked up with a producer who was actually a producer for that Hatfields and McCoys series. He was one of the producers on it. And so we're working on a script for a pilot in 8-episode series out of this one book. You know, somebody's got to buy it, but at least I know there's guys who've written movies and the other guys are producers, so you never know. And it was funny because the producer worked for Kevin Costner for a number of years. So when we started writing the pilot, he said, "I want you to rewrite this whole character and make it good." Now, I don't think, you never know if he'd say yes, but at least you won't put it in front of him, so it has to be good. So, fingers crossed. But the cool thing is, they're both hell-bent, and I'm glad of this, they want to shoot it in Maine, if they can, if the whole series they would do in Maine, so that would be pretty cool.
That would be cool.
that is the dream of all us authors, is to get a Netflix series or movies or.
Luckily, luckily you go out to Lakewood, it looks exactly the same pretty much. I went in there, my
Yeah.
stepdaughter did a play there this summer, it still looks like about the 1920s. So. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I could envision when reading your book, that they're out there golfing and theater's there. Famous people are coming up because you're escaping the heat, I'm sure, of New York City. And
It must have been something, and I guess my grandfather used to caddy out there, and they used to there was a trolley that ran from downtown out there, I guess. So, it seems like I could vaguely remember as a kid, maybe trolley tracks down Main Street. I don't know. Must have been something.
was there trolley tracks down
Yeah.
Main Street?
I don't remember them. He's a little older than me.
Yeah, that's true.
You're older than you. Yeah, I could be wrong. I could have just seen it in a picture or something. But it is.
But there was a trolley. My mother talked about taking the trolley, because it would go pretty far, because people would take it to go to work.
Yeah,
So,
I wasn't disbelieving him, I just
Yeah.
remember that.
So if a mystery broke out tonight in Madison, and Sherlock Holmes, Columbo, or Joff Langdon were in town, who would solve the mystery and why?
Well, I'm a little, might have to say Langdon. But you come to Madison, Madison's, a little rough around the edges. I don't think Sherlock Holmes would last long here, going around doing his, obvious deduction sort of things. So I'm going to have to rule out Sherlock Holmes. Columbo now might fit in a little better. He's got that rumpled sort of thing and that low-key manner, and it's a little more Madison. But he, likes to strike up a conversation and sort of fool people into giving away more information. And that's not really Langdon. Langdon's just a bulldog. And he just goes after it and, just keep pounding forward. And I think he has more of the main mannerisms and whatnot that would dig into the people and get along better with them, such as at the Pines, which might be the depot, and places like that. I think he would fit in better and would get more information. So along those lines, I'd have to go with Langdon. So tell me a little bit about your writing style, John. You are in a worse position than me because you have a day job
Yeah.
and a 4-year-old.
We have a routine. I write at night, probably at least 4 nights a week, then sometimes more on the weekend, but we go up and he put on a show for him where he has a tablet. My wife reads and I write, and where I don't write from a plot, I just know where it starts and where I want it to end. And I just go and it's whatever comes to my mind, and I just try and picture it in my head. So if there's 4 guys standing around a fire talking about how they're going to get revenge, you kind of think like, what would they say? What would they have around to do it? And that is kind of how that's how the style goes, really. And I literally have no idea. I had no idea that I'd put anything about prohibition in there. I didn't really think about any. I just knew there would be a bad guy. And as I started putting them together, I actually do a lot of pre-work on the lawnmower because I have a huge lawn. So I'm riding around thinking about this. I'm like, I got to finish this up and get in there and get this down. This is good. You know? But that's how a lot of it comes like that. And when I first started writing, I said, I can't be doing this right. And then I saw this a video with Stephen King, who is what's called a pantser. You're either a plotter or a pantser. And he said, I'm a pantser because I never want to ruin a good story with a plot. So I'm like, okay, good. I guess if Stephen King does it that way, then maybe it's fine. And it does make sense because you're either very methodical and have it all laid out, or you just run with it. So that's what I do. But then it's interesting because when you go reread it, that's where I have somebody edit it. Then all of a sudden, then that's when the work begins. I wrote this. Both the first 2 books I wrote in probably about 30 days. But then I spent about 6 months editing, between having editors and going back over it and then eventually line by line. Not completely all that time, but I would just keep going back to it.
You do have a little bit of an outline in the fact that it's sort of based on family stories.
That's right. Now
So you
that helps
have
a
this
lot.
outline in your head that, that gives you the broad strokes, and then you got to fill in the paint.
In the second book has a lot of kind of true family stories mixed in there, true characters from the family. So you're right. When you have those ones, it's a lot easier to make the story flow. You? Yourself?
Over the years, I've had kids and I've been doing writing, but my desk is in the middle of my living room, and I put headphones on and listen to jazz music just to block everything out, instrumental, no vocals to distract me, and I'm lost in the corner of the living room at my desk. And over the years, I started mainly Power and mainly Fear. I was running 3 businesses when I was writing them, and so I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning. I'm the opposite. I'm pretty much brain dead by night, so early on was better. But now that I'm dedicated to writing, it's a little bit easier. I get a cup of coffee and then I move over to the desk and write. Because I've been writing a lot lately, over the last 4 years since I've got a publisher, I'm always working on 3 different books at least. I'm writing a book, I'm editing a book, and I'm promoting a book. So, and sometimes I'm editing several books. I have an editor that I work with before I go to the publisher, and so he'll give me edits back on a book at the same time that a book I've submitted to the publisher gives me edits back on that book. So, I might be editing 2 different books at the same time and writing a 3rd one as well as promoting another one. And I have caught myself a few times, because I'm writing a Clay Wolf book and a Goff Langdon book, and it'll be like, well, Langdon, pulled his gun and shot this person. It's like, no, this is the Clay Wolf series. Clay Wolf pulled this, so I do have to be a little careful there. And as you let on, the editing is, one of the very serious pieces. And I'm starting a new book, I've written a new book that I'm editing now, called The Not So Merry Adventures of Max Fried, and it's sort of a modern day Robin Hood story. but the editor that I work with before I go to the publisher has got me back what I call the global edits. And that can be one of the most fun times because he makes a lot of great suggestions on how to really dig deep and, strengthen a character and strengthen a scene. Usually when I get back to global edits, I spend the first couple days just cursing at them. And then after a time, I'm like, okay, that's not such a bad idea after all. And I wouldn't say that I follow his advice all the time, but more often than not, it's like, okay, that's a pretty good idea. So that's worked for me.
I echo that because I think the first time I got it back on the first book, I'm like, I just paid you $1,000 for you to tell me this. And everything. You mean you don't understand the story? It's just right there.
At least buy me dinner first.
Yeah. So that's good. And then you have your ideal reader here.
Yeah, actually I should have said my first edits is my father.
That's me.
Right here.
Not me.
Skip Cost of East Madison, Maine,
Yeah.
lore and fame. But whenever I finish a chapter, I put it on my desk. The next morning, I get the paper out of the box, I read the paper, and my first editor happens to live in an efficiency apartment above my garage, and he shares my paper. So I put the chapter into the paper and put a rubber band around it and throw it up on his deck for him to come back with his immediate edits. And he gives me feedback on a daily basis on that. At one point I killed somebody in one of the books, and all I got was a string of curses from him because I guess he liked that particular character, so he was pretty unhappy, which is always an interesting concept because you got to kill people in books. You start off killing somebody that's likable, and it's easy to kill the baddies. Everybody's like, yeah, but you gotta occasionally kill somebody that everybody likes too, and that just makes it more personal, reasonable, and realistic. So if you're never killing any of the good people, everybody's like, it'll be fine, there's this big fight, no big deal. So throughout the course of my books, I kill some people that are very well liked. The mainly Power is probably the worst, where people still occasionally walk past me and say, you killed so-and-so? And then they spit on me. And I've had a lot of angry people.
Well, it's true, and I think even Stephen King says that in his book. It says you have to kill your darlings to make it the story. If not, it becomes so predictable that you just say, I'm going to get to use for this guy at some point. So it's like, I like to put shock in there, something you don't see coming, different twists and things like that. And so my wife is my ideal reader. I hand her this stuff. And she kind of said the same thing to me, like, why, you're killing too many people in this book. You need to, it's going to be too morose, you need to
lighten up, have a drink.
Yeah.
My wife is my very final editor. Actually, the publisher will do a little spit shine at it, but my wife is the best at that, finding the smallest mistakes, like instead of the word from, you wrote form. So a spell check won't catch it. And when you read it over, your eyes just say from, but you've really spelled form, things like that. And she is just amazing at finding flaws with me, where nobody else can.
That's great. That's good. I do the same thing. There's certain words in from and form is one of them.
Yeah,
It happens all the time.
it doesn't pick up, and your eyes just glaze over. And by the time I'm done editing, I will have gone through 8 to 9 edits of a book, and by that point, your eyes are just starting to,
I
go
think you know
over
the
it.
story so well, you start reading it without actually looking at the words.
Yeah.
And so you see, that's how you miss that stuff. It's like, God, I read this 6 times. How the heck could that be in there?
I had a question, John.
Yeah.
With Matt, whom I've known for a long time, he became a writer. But in 3rd grade, I thought he was going to be a football player. And I've been waiting for him to play football and put No. He says in third grade, he decided he wanted to become a writer. How about you, John? How did it work?
I don't know. Well, first of all, I was more of a mathlete than an athlete, so I knew sports wouldn't be professional or anything. Be a current player, I don't know.
How'd you get into writing?
You know, I think it's one of those things. A lot of people, they say 80% of people or something like that want to write a book, 1% do or something like that. But it's just something that I had thought about, and it's sitting there and when I tried to write it the first time, I felt like it's a good story. I like to tell the stories. I think that's the fun part of it. You're making up characters, you know, and that you know, everybody starts to fall in love with, and then something bad happens to them or something good, and you can cheer against the bad guys, root for the good guys and stuff like that. So I don't know. And then once I started doing it, once I wrote the first one, I said, oh, wow, okay, I can do this, and then just. So I actually started on August 5th last year. So just,
And you enjoyed it.
yeah, I love it. I mean, it's like the greatest hobby I ever had, probably, as far as like something. It really is. And I'm not ashamed to say sometimes I write these, I'm writing through tears pouring down my face. And then like if it moves me to tears, then probably hopefully it moves somebody else too.
Usually I'm crying because it's so bad when I'm writing. Do people have other questions, or we can keep conversing, but we can kind of allow off-topic questions to be entered in if anybody wants to? And it was really in 7th and 8th grade with Coach Daigle that I wanted to become a football player.
It's his fault?
Well, he set me down the football path.
Come on, Phil, why didn't you become a football player instead of a writer?
Well, see, I can't even write a paragraph, so I was football guy.
Very good, very good.
It was probably mono before I went to college. I was going to play football in college. I got mono, wasn't able to play football, realized there were other things in life, and like I said, one of my professors got me excited to write a book, which needed a lot of work, but I persevered.
I think there's a part of it too, and I don't know if it's ego necessarily, but it is kind of a cool thought that I've written this thing, I'll be gone 20, 30 years from now, but this will still be out there. I mean, somebody might not read it, but it might be sitting right on a shelf at Madison Library, you know, and it's like you left that there, and then, you know, your family, your kids can say, like, oh yeah, that's Mark, reads right there. He's got a whole stack of them. Yard sale coming up, 25 cents a piece. So there is that element of it too. I think that's, once you start doing it, it's a lot of fun. And I actually, the first book I worked with this self-publishing school, and they teach you how to do this stuff. And the other 3 books I did myself. So the covers I have, the professional artists do it, and I have formatting software. So so it looks like a book, and you can put different elements in it, and then you upload it to Amazon. So, or Ingram Smart, same way. So that's a part that's nerve-wracking too, is all the editing at the end. And you go through it, and all of a sudden you see there's something not just right, so you have to take your file off, redo it before you start printing them. If not, you'll have 100 misprinted boxes.
And you touched upon earlier how 80% of the people want to write a book and only 1%. And so I am constantly asked by people, you know, well, I've got an idea for a book, you know, what do you think I should do? And I say, write. You know, people want to take an MFA course, and they want to read Stephen King's book on how to write. And I'm not a big believer in all of that structure, because I believe wholly that every writer should be individual, or, you know, the fear now is AI. If you want something to spit out, you can get AI, to do something like that, but what really makes a writer unique is just writing in their own voice and sitting down and writing. And that's something I believe wholeheartedly in, is you just got to sit down in the chair and you got to write. And it's not always easy to sit down in the chair and write. You know, it's a job often. And people don't always want to go to their job, wherever it may be. And us writers don't always want to do that, but you got to kind of punch forward and just keep moving and write. And, you know, as my dad likes to say, move and the way will open.
I think that's a good place to stop. We're going to be off topic, maybe we won't be on camera.
Okay, that's good, unless there's any final questions or thoughts or insults or criticisms or...
Now that's off camera.
Oh, that's coming, okay.
Yes. Well, great, thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having us, Julie.
And we've got you set up over there.
Yeah.